The house felt unusually quiet the morning my husband left for his business trip. I watched from the doorway as his car disappeared down the road, thinking about how the next 2 weeks would be a chance to breathe, reset, maybe even get some long overdue rest. But what I didn't expect was that I wouldn't be alone. His son, Jordan, had come home from college just a few days before. He'd planned to visit only for the weekend, catch up with his dad, and then head back. But after a sudden change of plans, he asked if he could stay a little longer. Of course, I said yes. It felt natural. After all, I'd known him since he was a teenager. We'd always gotten along well, shared a comfortable, easy dynamic. He was kind, respectful, and had grown into a thoughtful young man. But something about this time felt different. Maybe it was the way he lingered in the kitchen a little longer than usual, or how his eyes met mine with a strange intensity one couldn't quite explain. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the silence in the house playing tricks on me. But as the days passed, I started to notice subtle changes, little moments that made my heart beat just a bit faster. He'd sit a little too close on the couch, ask questions that felt too personal, or compliment me in a way that made me pause. I tried to brush it off. I tried to be rational. He's just being nice, I told myself. He's young, probably bored, and this house isn't exactly buzzing with excitement. But the air between us kept shifting, like something unspoken was quietly building. I caught myself wondering what he was thinking when he looked at me like that. And then, one night, something happened that I still can't fully explain. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No lines were crossed. But in that moment, brief, electric, and utterly confusing, I realized things could never go back to how they were. Now, I keep asking myself, was it just a moment, or the start of something I never saw coming? And what would happen when my husband returned? Because some lines, once blurred, are almost impossible to unsee. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept turning things over in my head, wondering if I was reading too much into everything. Jordan had barely said anything unusual, yet the energy in the room had changed so much, it felt like something invisible had moved between us. Maybe it was just the quiet, too much space, and too few people. Or maybe it was something neither of us wanted to admit out loud. The next morning, things felt normal again. Or at least, he acted like nothing had happened. He greeted me with the same warm smile, asked if I wanted coffee, even offered to run errands if I needed anything. But now I couldn't help but notice every word, every glance. And I kept asking myself, was he pretending nothing happened, or had he genuinely forgotten that strange moment between us? Jordan was always easy to talk to, even before all this. When I married his father 3 years ago, he was just starting college. He'd always been polite and kind, maybe a little reserved, but that changed over time. He'd grown more open with me, more trusting. We'd talk about everything, his classes, his friends, even things he said he couldn't share with his dad. I used to feel proud of that. Like I had somehow earned his respect in a world where step-parents often feel like outsiders. But now, I didn't know what to do with that closeness. It wasn't wrong, not yet, but it didn't feel entirely right anymore either. I found myself pulling back a little, trying not to be alone with him too much. But the harder I tried to keep things distant, the more awkward it became. He seemed to notice, too. He'd ask, "Is everything okay?" with a look that was too sincere, too searching. And I'd always answer with a quick nod and a smile, even though my chest was tight with questions. One afternoon, I found a sketch pad lying on the kitchen counter. I knew Jordan liked to draw, but I'd never seen his work before. Curious, I flipped through it and paused. There was a sketch of me. Soft pencil lines, delicate shading. It was unmistakable. My heart skipped. I shut the book quietly and placed it back exactly where I found it, pretending nothing had happened. But in that moment, I knew this wasn't just in my head anymore. Something had shifted. And the worst part? I had no idea which direction it was going to take. I started avoiding the living room in the evenings. That's where we usually sat, watching movies or talking about our days. Now, I'd retreat to the bedroom early, pretending to be tired or busy with work. But even behind a closed door, I couldn't stop thinking. Jordan hadn't said anything about the sketch. Maybe he didn't mean for me to see it. Or maybe he did. Days passed, and the silence between us grew louder. He wasn't pushing boundaries, not directly. But his presence lingered more than before. He seemed to move slower around me, like he was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But the space between us felt heavier each day. And still, I hadn't told my husband anything. How could I? What would I even say? Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Jordan's mom, his real mother. We'd only spoken a few times over the years, always polite, always brief. She said she wanted to talk. Nothing serious, she claimed. Just checking in. But something about her tone felt off. Hesitant. Careful. She asked how Jordan was doing, if he was adjusting well. I told her he seemed fine, but she paused on the other end, like she was holding back. Then she said, almost too casually, he's been different lately. Quiet. Distant. You'd tell me if anything felt wrong, right? That question stuck with me all night. What did she mean by wrong? Did she know something? Had she noticed something in him that I had only just begun to sense? Later, I asked Jordan about it, why his mom had called, if they'd had a fight or something. He shrugged it off, said she was just being dramatic, always worrying. But I caught a flicker in his eyes, like he knew more than he was letting on. That night, I dreamt of the sketch again. Not the image itself, but the feeling it gave me, the way it looked so gentle, so intentional. It wasn't just art. It was attention. And I couldn't help but wonder, was I the only one caught in this tension, or had he been building it long before I noticed? The days kept slipping by. My husband was still away. And with each hour, the walls of the house felt tighter, like they were closing in on secrets neither of us dared to say out loud. The evening my husband was due to return was only 2 days away. I should have felt relieved, like things were about to settle back into place. But instead, I felt more unsettled than ever. Jordan had grown quieter, more observant. Like he knew I was pulling away and he was waiting for a moment to speak, or maybe do something I couldn't predict. We barely spoke that day. He stayed in his room most of the time, and I stayed in mine. But even without words, the house was thick with tension. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, even the vibration of a text on my phone. I kept checking messages from my husband, who seemed completely unaware of the unease building inside this house. He was excited to come home, counting down the days. And I couldn't bring myself to say anything beyond the usual. Can't wait to see you. That night, a storm rolled in, heavy rain, distant thunder, and flashes of lightning that lit up the entire hallway. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, trying to distract myself with a book, when I heard soft footsteps just outside my door. I froze. The knock was gentle, hesitant. Can I talk to you? Jordan's voice was low, almost careful. I hesitated before opening the door just a crack. Is everything okay? He looked exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. Like he'd been carrying something he couldn't hold anymore. I don't want to leave without saying something. Before your husband gets back. My throat tightened. What is it, Jordan? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me with the same intense, unreadable expression I'd been trying to avoid. I think I've been pretending everything's fine, and it's not. I know you've felt it too. I stepped back, not because I was scared, but because I didn't know where this was going. Jordan, this isn't a good idea. I'm not trying to make it worse, he said quickly. But you need to know something before he comes back. Something I should have told you a long time ago. The air felt thick. My heart was racing, and just as he opened his mouth to speak, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the hallway, and I realized this night wasn't going to end quietly. The hallway was completely dark except for the dim blue glow of the storm flashing through the windows. I stood frozen, barely able to make out Jordan's face in the shadows. He didn't say another word, just looked at me like he was weighing something heavy. My pulse thudded in my ears, and I felt every second stretch too long. I didn't mean for this to happen, he finally said, voice low, almost broken. But there's something you need to know. About my dad. About everything. I blinked. What do you mean? He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his phone. There's a reason I stayed back. I didn't come here just to visit. I found something I thought you should see. But I didn't know how to tell you. He tapped the screen and held the phone out toward me. A video started playing, blurry at first, the audio muffled. I recognized my husband's voice before I could even process what I was hearing. He was talking to someone, laughing. Then a woman's voice answered. Not just any woman, one I recognized from his office, someone he always claimed was just a colleague. They weren't just talking, they were close. Too close. The kind of close that made the truth impossible to deny. I felt my stomach twist, my knees suddenly weak. I leaned against the doorframe to steady myself. How did you get this? Jordan looked away. He left his iCloud logged in. I wasn't snooping at first. I just wanted to play music from his account. But I found messages, pictures, and then the videos. I didn't know what to do, so I waited. I stayed here thinking maybe I could protect you. Or maybe just give you the truth before he came home and kept lying to your face. The wind howled outside as thunder cracked again. Inside, everything was still, except the chaos spinning in my chest. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about this house, about us, was suddenly unraveling. You should have told me sooner, I said, barely above a whisper. I know, he said. But I was afraid. Not just of what it would do to you, but of what it would mean for us. His voice caught on the last word, and that's when I finally understood. This wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about my husband's secrets. Jordan had been holding something deeper. A feeling, a hope, one that was never supposed to exist. My thoughts were racing. This changed everything. Not just how I saw my husband, but how I saw Jordan and myself. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But I stood there, frozen between what I knew and what I didn't want to admit. Because in that moment, I realized the real question wasn't what had already happened, but what was I about to do next? And with my husband returning tomorrow, I had less than 24 hours before everything came crashing down. The next morning, the air in the house felt unnaturally still. The storm had passed, but its weight hadn't left. I hadn't slept. Neither had Jordan. We didn't speak much after the video. There was nothing else to say, only decisions to make. My husband's flight landed in a few hours. I kept glancing at the clock, every tick louder than the last. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, untouched and cold. Jordan walked in slowly, like he was afraid to disturb whatever fragile piece was left. Are you going to tell him? He asked softly. I didn't answer at first. The truth was, I didn't know. A part of me wanted to expose everything, confront him the moment he walked through the door. But another part, one I didn't want to admit, was exhausted. Tired of fighting for a marriage that had been quietly slipping through my fingers for months. He made his choices, I finally said. Now I have to make mine. Jordan nodded, but I could feel the weight behind his silence. He wasn't just thinking about my marriage. He was thinking about us, or whatever strange, fragile thing had formed between us in these days of blurred lines and unspoken truths. When the door finally opened that afternoon, time seemed to freeze. My husband walked in, suitcase rolling behind him, wearing the same easy smile I'd seen 100 times. "Hey," he said, setting his things down. "I missed you." I didn't smile. I didn't even move. Jordan stood just a few steps behind me, silent. My husband noticed the tension almost immediately. "What's going on?" I reached into my pocket and handed him the phone. His face changed in slow, quiet stages: confusion, denial, then a flicker of guilt. But before he could speak, I said, "Don't bother. I've seen enough." He opened his mouth, probably to defend himself, but I stood up and walked past him. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't need more lies. But just as I reached the stairs, Jordan called out, "There's something else." I turned slowly. He looked pale. The video wasn't the only thing I found. There was another message. From someone else. A woman. She said she wasn't the only one, and she mentioned me. Said he was jealous. That your husband had been watching us. The room went still, and suddenly I realized the storm hadn't passed after all. It was just beginning. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Jordan's words hung in the air like a second storm cloud. I looked at my husband, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders dropped, and suddenly he looked like a man caught, tired, cornered, and small. "Is that true?" I asked him. He didn't answer. That was all I needed. In that silence, the pieces finally fell into place. The extra cameras he installed last year, for security. The sudden questions about where I was going, what I was doing. The strange sense of being watched, even when I thought I was alone. All of it pointed to something deeper, something darker than infidelity. He wasn't just cheating. He'd been trying to control the narrative. Control me. And maybe, in some twisted way, he saw Jordan as a threat before either of us even understood what was happening. "I'm done," I said, quietly but clearly. "I don't want to hear anything else." I picked up my bag, grabbed the car keys, and turned toward the door. I didn't know where I was going yet, just that I had to leave. Not out of anger, but because peace would never live in a house built on lies and quiet manipulation. Jordan followed me outside, but he didn't speak. We stood under the soft afternoon sky, both of us drained. He looked like he wanted to say something, but instead, he just nodded like he understood this had to be the end of something, not the beginning. "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm choosing myself this time." He gave a faint smile. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I drove off without looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. I cared enough to walk away from something broken. Enough to stop asking questions that never had real answers. In the weeks that followed, I filed for divorce quietly. I changed the locks, changed my routines, and changed the way I looked at my own reflection. Jordan went back to school. We didn't stay in touch, not because of bitterness, but because some chapters aren't meant to be reopened. Looking back now, I don't regret the silence, or the questions, or even the tension. It taught me to listen to the things I tried to ignore. To trust my instincts. And most of all, to know that sometimes the person you really need to come home to is yourself.